Hi friends, just another quick addition to the Meditations and Transformation series. So this will be number 21, but I hope to make this really quick. Just yesterday, the Association of Professional Futurists put out the new issue of Compass, and we pitched an article for this edition, which is the how-to edition. And it was an article that we had been using to float around in our media campaigns. But it's one of the shorter articles in there. I love that it's short because we just want to get to the point really quickly. And I'm making this video to sort of supplement that a little bit. So the article is called Ready, Empowered, Conscious, how to really use the future stool. And the idea is that the stool has 3 legs, sort of like the triple bottom line. But in this case, it's future ready, future empowered, and future conscious. This is something we've been talking about for a long time, and we actually launched a campaign on it at TFSX in early 2025. This is how we're framing up all of our offerings. But it goes beyond that because it really is the philosophy of how we approach futures thinking with all of our clients and the work that we do and the offerings we make and the platforms we make and the retreats that we host, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's something really important to be said here. First of all, I'll start with this. I absolutely can't stand the phrase future proof. And it's not a knock on somebody. It's more of the concept of, I think this is a part of the problem why people might say, you know, what is the deal with futures thinking? And you can see this in the latest video that we just released today, my interview on the Creating a Foresight Fueled Action series with Michelle Shevin, where she and I basically talk about foresight needing an intervention because a lot of times it gets used to actually replicate what it's saying for companies. In other words, futuring to the system or just reinforcing what's being said. In other words, example, if I say AI is the future and then you invest in AI, you're making AI the future, and we're really just telling companies what future to build, and they're building around a system that already exists, right? So that's just self-perpetuating prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy of the future. So having said that, future proof, because the idea is that we're like making sure that the future can't get us and we can stay relevant, and that whatever future unfolds, we are guarded against it, or that we've usurped it enough to where we've made it our future in line with our relevance and what we're already doing in the systems and the dominant narratives that already exist. That's future proofing. And that is one of the reasons I think that if and when the futures feel people go like, and wince at it and hold their nose a little bit, this idea of future proofing, the concept of it is what's at the basis of that. And then when you just say, yeah, we're about future proofing, why are we proofing ourselves against the future? The future should be exciting. The future should be transformative. I know that the future in the face of what we're looking at in the present here is daunting, and that's putting it mildly. But also, it's like, are we saying that we should engage in a future of changing minds, hearts, and souls, so that no matter what future does unfold and how it turns out, that we're aiming for transformative futures and not a relevance of what already is, redoing the present in the future. So back to the, stool again, future ready is the idea that companies are not proofing against the future, but they're embracing what's unfolding, and they are leveraging it for a more pull of the future rather than the push of the future. What do I mean by that? The push of the future is sort of the trend saying, you're being pushed and you're going in this direction whether you like it or not. 5, wealthy men in Silicon Valley made a future, the future, that we need to follow, and we're pushing you with that, all the trends. And so it's like, oh, we're being pushed into the future whether we like it or not. The pull of the future is our aspirations, our goals, the opportunities, following what wants to emerge. We're going to get to that more in just a second on another part of the stool. So being future ready is really engaging the future in a positive way so that we're moving towards the change and transformation. And this is really where we are using the tools and the methods of foresight, and companies enter into future ready. Now, I hope they don't stay there, because the stool will fall down if the other 2 legs aren't there. So I'm going to skip all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum, although there's no dichotomy between these. Again, Without one of the legs of the stool, you're going to fall over. And I do think that's a part of the problem with a lot of the futures work, is because we're just trying to only stand on a future ready, or probably a future proof leg of a stool. And we don't have the other two legs. This is about choosing which leg you like the best. You have to have all three, or the stool falls down. And so at the other end of the spectrum, if there was that way, the three legs, I guess you can't really say that they're in any order. And they're not actually. Maybe I'll get into that in just a second. I want to make this a short video, though. I'm trying. So there's futures consciousness. And this is the idea that the future is a biological, a psychological, or a cognitive neurological, but psychological in the sense of like this is, it's not about brain matter. It's not about evolution of the human brain. It's about the growth of social constructing within the collective. So the psychological, it's a biological, and it's also a sacred. What do I mean by sacred? I've explained this on a few other videos, but sacredness is really what we're attuned to in the universe. I even said on one video that I consider myself to be a mystic philosopher in the terms of futures thinking. And that might sound crazy, but it's really not, because really we all have a philosophy. This is how the world works and how things run. And unconsciously, that's dictating what we'll do. So you got to check your philosophy before you wreck yourself. And, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Haha. And then there's the, the mystic part. It just means that I'm being connected to sense making and intuition and feeling, and that everything is not figured out by data and control and mechanization and linear. As a matter of fact, I would say most isn't. And this is where I really respect people like Sonia Blacknott, who is doing this work with wayfinding and saying, for instance, the Polynesian wayfinders in the sea didn't need to use telescopes and, I can't remember what some of these navigation tools were called, but I should know. My dad was big into this and all that. But all the stuff where they look at the stars and things. Words are escaping me right now. And they were able to feel their way through it because they were so used to it. They were wayfinders. I can feel the wind. I can feel the sea. I can see the stars, and I know how the night sky orients me towards where we're going. It's wayfinding. But it's something else about futures consciousness, that it itself is I have often said a subset, but I think that it really is another description for collective consciousness. Being, consciousness itself unfolding and saying, here is what has come before, and you're connected to all of consciousness in the universe, and here's what's coming next. So ancestors past, ancestors future, we are ancestors present of the past and future, right? And so futures consciousness is tied up in all consciousness. It's collective consciousness, and it says this is what we can anticipate to unfold. Imaginative anticipation, or imaginal anticipation is what I was trying to say. And then that is, allows us to tap into the consciousness that is a biological, psychological, and sacred part of futures thinking. Or futures thinking itself is a biological, psychological, and sacred dynamic of all life itself, or of consciousness, see? And so, you don't go tell clients that. But there's ways to lead them, to wayfind, to navigate towards that, because without understanding that important element, then we just think the future's, readiness is these tools and this lever that we pull and all the mechanical stuff. And you can easily abandon that and then come back to it if you feel like the time is right, and abandon it again. And you don't really understand what it means to be plugged into in here, unlocking within ourselves this future's consciousness that plugs us into the emerging imaginal anticipation of all living things. So when we do that, when we understand that then futures becomes not this mechanical tool to structure what we already have. It becomes a living tap into all living things, a generative anticipation of what wants to emerge and unfold. That changes our future's readiness, but it also, taps us into this third leg, which is future empowered. So if you do imagine, this future's readiness, future's consciousness on the opposite ends, you can see how they sound like opposite ends of the spectrum. Again, I don't really think they're opposite, but play along. And then in the middle, you've got this third leg of future empowered, which means that we're not going to just say, trends are pulling or pushing us, And we're not way out here, which I don't think is really all that way out, but you know what I mean in terms of organizational work. We're not out here saying like, hey, organizations, you should learn about the biological, psychological, and sacred dynamics of all living things. And I'm gonna be like, what can we do with that? The honest truth is they can do a lot with that, but not under the system we're living in right now. And that's exactly what Futures Consciousness helps them do, is say like, wait, this system is not sent down from heaven. There's other ways of seeing reality, and we can transition to this. Future Empowered allows that to happen, because this is where transformation takes place, not from trends, but from understanding paradigm shifting into higher order realities. Let me say that again. It's not trends. Forget the trends. They're coming from the system that we're in already now anyway. Future Empowered is about saying like, oh, the future empowers me to draw myself towards the higher order purpose of my organization, my life, my community, my school, my educational institution. What are we made for? What's in our DNA? And how do we reach those higher order purposes? How do we transform through growth curves, natural growth curves, into higher order purpose? How do we paradigm shift for transformation? You may have heard before the term organizational development, and then many people saying, yes, but what we really need is organizational transformation, and that falls in this Future Empowered space. And when you've got these two ends working pretty good, you're like, I understand that Futures is not about downloading skills into me. It's about unlocking the living dynamics of imaginal anticipation from within me and you and all of us connected together, that gives us a perception of what wants to emerge with the rest of life itself, all living things. And then, we can take those tools like Sohail's Futures Triangle or CLA or the Natural Foresight Framework or, qualitative predictive analytics, QPA that TFSX created a long time ago, our Futures Wheels or any other tool that you might use, and we would use them very differently. You see that? We use them differently when we understand all three legs. Now we're not trying to use them just for the strategy, organizational development inside of the relevance of the system, but we're like, oh, there's transformational realities, there's paradigm shifting into higher order purpose of who we are. What's in our DNA? Have we pulled that out? How do we unlock it? How do I tap into what the universe is trying to do? How do we collectively jive together to see a better future for all of us? And so that's the three legs of this tool. Without all three legs, we tend to practice an unhealthy futures. It's not a healthy way of practicing foresight, because we're not really tapping into all that futures thinking and foresight really is from an organic, a biological, a psychological, a sacred, a generative perspective, a higher order purpose perspective, a paradigm shifting perspective, a transformational perspective that takes us beyond us being locked into one system that is a system that's been around historically for a really short period of time anyway, but seems like we can never break free from, and does a lot of unhealthy things. Because I don't know if you've been noticing or not, but the poly crisis, the permanent crisis, the meta crisis all came from this system, not some other system. And the future must lie outside this system, or there is no future. As Dougal Hines says, that we are designing for a world worth living for, and it's not this one. That doesn't mean there's no good here. You are awesome, and we together are awesome. But I really wanted you to just hear this short video. I feel like there's more that I want to say, but I wanted to stop a long time ago. Already went too long, and we love you, and we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.